extension, you wouldn't be able to do that. And again, as we mentioned with the legs, that could be placed at a mechanical disadvantage, so the person would not survive quite as long. And it also depended on whether or not there was a footrest present. So Jesus was on the cross from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. with the last 3 hours being in darkness. He would have had to deal with sunburn, insects, and birds of prey. In the Passion of the Christ movie, of course, it shows a bird actually landing on one of the thieves' heads and actually pecking his eye out. So that would have been quite traumatic. There would have been intense sweating, which, of course, with your hands nailed to the cross, he would not have been able to wipe away the sweat or the blood draining down his face. This would have caused severe thirst and dehydration, which, combined with the sweating, again, he would be in impending shock. Okay, this is another crucifixion video that just kind of shows the actual process. These experiments are by Dr. David Ball, who's an international author on crucifixion. He's actually a physician out of Mississippi. And this is actually a video of a normal, healthy person being crucified and how the effects would be on a normal, healthy person.
A monitor is used to track the subject's vital signs. The experiment will be terminated if his heart rate reaches a dangerous level. His resting pulse is now 78 beats per minute. Dr. Ball secures the volunteer to the cross and has his respiration measured for a baseline. A spirometer calculates the volume of air drawn into the lungs. A pressure gauge measures the force his lungs exert to inhale and exhale. As soon as he's up on the cross, the subject's pulse rate climbs from 78 to 110 ppm. At 2.5 minutes, the pain is starting to set in.
Tell me where you're hurting?
Mostly in my thighs.
If the test subject is already showing signs of distress, imagine if he had nails through his hands and feet, and if his back was beaten to a pulp. At 7 minutes, the test subject's pulse climbs to 172, and his legs are trembling uncontrollably.
He's really showing some signs of fatigue now. But that's not respiratory fatigue. That's extremity fatigue.
I feel pretty tired. I'm very uncomfortable. Legs are very, very tired.
After 15 minutes and 20 seconds, the volunteer reaches his limit. The pain in his arms and legs is unbearable.
I'm not ready to come down.
The final stress measurements indicate several physiological changes. The pulse rate has climbed steadily from 78 to over 170 beats per minute.
What that means is the heart is having to work harder to pump enough blood and oxygen to the tissue.
The spirometer shows the subject's air intake is decreased by nearly 10%.
You felt a little bit more of a pressure on your chest, kind of a tightness.
I wanted, take deep breaths.
The pressure gauge shows an increase, which indicates the subject is working harder to breathe.
If your lung volume is going down in order to breathe, then you try to generate more pressure, just like the individuals on the cross are telling us. They feel this need to take a deep breath.
Respiration is clearly impacted by being suspended from the cross. Over time, this could be fatal, but the impairment isn't enough to identify asphyxiation as the sole cause of death.
Okay, so he lasted 15 minutes on the cross. That tells you Jesus was up there for 6 hours. And that leads us into the causes of death. So Jesus died at the 9th hour at 3 o'clock after 6 hours on the cross. Again, it's been considered that was a quick death. It felt like he had a more severe scourging and he lost a lot more blood than probably most people would have lost. There's been some question whether or not he died a slow death or this was some kind of catastrophic terminal event. Obviously, up to the very end, he had a clear mind. He was able to speak audibly, to be able to say it is finished. And typically that would not be consistent with asphyxiation or shock. And examples of sudden death would be like a blood clot to the lungs, cardiac rupture, that would have caused sudden death. Arrhythmia or regular heartbeat, again sudden death, aspiration, and then suspension trauma. So going back to asphyxiation, that's again the traditional view. It's out of favor now. We'll talk about it just a little bit. Normal respiration, the process of inhalation is active. Whenever we breathe in, our ribs elevate, our diaphragm goes downward. That creates this negative pressure in the lungs and air flows in. And when we exhale, it's a passive process. The diaphragm moves back up, the ribs come down, the air comes out. In crucifixion, where the arms are fixed up on the cross, the ribs are held in this extended position, and the diaphragm is actually held in the pulled down position. So the person would actually have to pull up to actually exhale instead and blow out the CO2 instead of actually inhale. And other factors with the asphyxiation would be the pain from the wounds, the rib fractures, the deflated lungs, and as I mentioned earlier, just the pain of his back rubbing against the rough timber of the cross would have been very painful. And this is just another slide showing actually trying to raise up and force the air out so he could take another breath. The ruptured heart theory, this was very popular in the 19th century, then it kind of fell out of favor for about 100 years. At the time, it was thought to be symbolic as a broken heart. Modern developments, though, has again brought it back into favor. It was thought to be due to trauma from the multiple beatings, the chest contusions from the falls that we talked about earlier, and then the excessive workload on the heart. All the fluid actually on the heart making it much harder to pump. And this condition was called cardiac tamponade. We pick up the book of John. When they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. These things happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled, not one of his bones will be broken. And as another scripture says, they will look on the one they have pierced. So this process of breaking the legs is called crucifixion. It was to accelerate the death process, also known as a coup de grace, or the death blow of mercy. Many times this was desirable for the crucifixion victim. They didn't have to suffer any longer. And of course, in Jesus' case, this was not done, but the soldier did verify his death with a spear thrust into his side. And what is known is he would have been dead at the time of the piercing. It's important to know these soldiers would have been under penalty of death if the crucifixion person did not die or if they escaped. So they knew exactly when the person was dead or not. And as mentioned in the passage we just read, this blood and water would have flowed from Jesus' side due to the spear thrust. The spear would have actually passed through the right thoracic cavity and into the right side of the heart, which would have been the distended, thin wall portion of the heart called the atrium. And that's where the blood would have come out. And the water would have been this effusion around the heart, a pericardial effusion, this water substance around the surface of the heart. And you see right here, the pericardium is this white around the heart. This fluid would have built up right around the heart. So the spear passing from the right side into the heart would produce the blood, and then the water right here. And this is a video also showing some of the causes of death and what the spear thrust would have done as well.
After several hours, Jesus seems to know that the end has come. The Bible says he called out his final words and then dies.
If he had died of hypovolemic shock, as some people say, what would have happened is he would have fainted. He would not have been able to holler out with a loud voice then suddenly die.
Other theories see asphyxiation as the cause of death, but that too appears unlikely.
If they have enough air in their lungs to holler out, they will not be in any danger of dying of asphyxiation. Cannot happen.
That he had enough strength and enough mental clarity just to cry out very effectively at the very end means to me that something catastrophic happened, and he knew that it was happening.
Many experts believe that the most likely cause of death is from his bruised and damaged heart.
Gradually, his heart is failing. The fluids would begin to back up in the lung, around the lungs, and actually around the outside of the heart, inside the heart sac, the pericardium.
The pericardium is a sac of fibrous tissue filled with a water-like fluid that surrounds and protects the heart.
With his pulse rate going to 180 or even more, he is under an enormous cardiovascular stress load.
What Dr. Ball firmly believes is that the bruised heart, under such extreme stress, ultimately ruptures. It would feel like a heart attack. Jesus would know his death is imminent. The ruptured heart continues to beat. With each pulse, it pushes blood into the pericardial sac until the heart finally stops.
You've got a heart that is ruptured. It's not functioning anymore. It's not pumping, but you've got a pericardial sac that is under pressure. Taut.
The final proof for Dr. Ball is revealed by the spear of a Roman soldier.
According to the Gospel of John, a Roman soldier takes a spear and sticks it inside Jesus to make sure that he's dead.
According to the Bible, blood and water flow from the wound.
What you have to understand is they've gone through this pericardial sac to get to the heart. Pericardial sac is under pressure. The blood has settled. So immediately you've got this flow of blood followed by clear fluid, which is described as water in the Bible.
Okay, so we'll move ahead into the burial from John. With Pilate's permission, Joseph of Arimathea came and took the body away. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with the spices and strips of linen. This was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb, in which no one had ever been laid. Because it was a Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. So, obviously, very quickly did the Passover beginning at sunset, and like you said, in accordance with Mosaic law. But also, rigor mortis, or the stiffness of death, typically sets in within 2 hours. So, with a lot of victims of crucifixion, they would just be pulled off the cross and then thrown in a ditch. But these guys wanted to get Jesus down before his body was stiffened up too much. Now, it's important to note, too, that during the burial process, the two Marys, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Jesus, saw where the tomb where Jesus' body was laid. And that's important later on. So, with the resurrection, which is the most important aspect of the whole process we've been discussing, from a medical aspect, it surpasses all our understanding and explanation. It is, by definition, a miracle of God and a testimony to the fact that he truly was the Son of God and who he claimed to be. Now, just a few theories of what some of the skeptics put forward. Probably one of the most famous theories is called a swoon theory. They claim that Jesus was drugged and then later revived in the tomb, and actually modern Islam believes a form of this to some degree. The death theory, that was popular in the first century. It's even mentioned in the book of Matthew. The hallucination theory, that actually all these people actually hallucinated that they saw Jesus after he was resurrected. But according to in 1 Corinthians, Paul says over 500 different people had seen Jesus. It would have been impossible for that to have happened. And there were at least 11 occasions where Jesus appeared to different people. And then then the mistaken tomb theory that's really not logical because Mary Magdalene and, again, Jesus' mother saw where the body was placed in the tomb. So many reasons to refute these claims. Obviously, one would be a person cannot survive a heart laceration. You cannot survive a spear thrust through the right side of your heart. I don't think anything else needs to be. Any other comments on that? We have secular historians' confirmation. The soldiers, again, were seasoned. They knew how to make sure a person was dead. All the disciples, except John, later became martyrs. People don't die because of something they know to be fake. The women's testimony, that would have been inadmissible to court at the time. If someone was trying to fake this whole story, they would not have actually mentioned that women were the first ones to find Jesus. And probably most importantly, no witnesses came forth with evidence to refute the resurrection. I think it's interesting, this quote from Josh McDowell: "The silence of the Jews speaks louder than the voice of the Christians." They never came forth with any evidence, or they never came forth with a body or anything. This is a famous quote from a Harvard law professor, Simon Greenlee. "According to the laws of legal evidence used in the course of law, there's more evidence for the historical fact of the resurrection of Jesus Christ than for just about any other event in history." And this is also an interesting quote from Hank Hanegraaff regarding these theories put forth by the skeptics. They believe that Jesus survived 3 days without medical attention, single-handedly rolled away an enormously heavy tombstone, subdued an armed guard, strolled around on pierced feet, and seduced his disciples into communicating the myth that he had conquered death while he lived out the remainder of his life in obscurity. So, to recount, and this is very important, we know that Jesus Christ was fully human. He took no shortcuts. He suffered every bit as much as you or I would have. He endured mental anguish, public humiliation. He was mocked, and he suffered the most extreme forms of torture and died a painful death on the cross. But most importantly, we know that he came back to life on the third day, and he appeared to many witnesses. These facts testify to the fact that Jesus truly was the Son of God. He suffered and died in our place. His incomparable, unwavering, and utterly undeserving love covered our sins through his death on the cross. And finally, one quote from John Piper: "The highest act of love is the giving of the best gift, and if necessary, at the greatest cost to the least deserving." That's what God did. At the loss of his son's life to the totally undeserving, God gave the best gift, the display of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. That's it. I guess questions, or probably don't have time for questions, do we? 2 minutes? Okay. All right. Any questions?